Hello and no shit, that's the wrong start. Fucking hell. Hello and welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland Review podcast. A 2-1 defeat in South Wales means it's now sadly no wins in 4 and only 1 win in the last 5. It feels a little negative for the first time in a while, but just as the team can't, we won't shy away from it. And we are going to bring a fast and furious review of today's game in almost the immediate aftermath of the match and try to remain as balanced as much as we can. I'm absolutely loaded with cold, so if I sound like I'm speaking through my nose, I suppose I sort of am or can't. I don't sound right, so forgive me. But to join me, as always, there's two people who I don't think have a cold and hopefully will be a little bit more listenable. First and foremost, as always, as he's been this season, to join me is returning guest Brad Sharp. Brad, how are you? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm not bad, Graham. I haven't got a cold, so all's good for me. We're doing this podcast a bit quicker, following the full-time whistle than we usually do, so it's a little bit more raw. I'm a little bit disappointed without being too angry, really, but I'm sure we'll dissect it as we progress through the next half an hour.
Yeah, absolutely. Ross Black, you've decided to come back this week, mate, to join us for a defeat. Brilliant, well done. Thanks. How are you, mate? You all right?
I am good. Just as you can tell, I just thrive off negativity. I'm one of them, I just love it when we get beat. It's just one of them, I just thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to come back and slag the team off. That's just what I do.
Yeah, that's the whole point of today's podcast. We're just going to go through one by one. So starting Anthony Patterson, number one. No, we're not. We're going to try and remain as... My favourite word at the minute is nuance. So I'm going to try and remain as nuanced as possible. There's a cliche in football that I've probably never believed more in, being a week is a long time in football. I'll stick with you, Ross, for the first question, but me, Brad and Dave felt really positive last week, despite the fact it was sort of 0-0. We thought Preston were there for the taking, sort of, but it was one of those games where it just wasn't going to go in. From all that positivity last week, despite the fact we didn't win, I feel really despondent this evening, and I don't like that because I'm aware that it's not the most inviting podcast when I go, oh, I'm feeling despondent, I've got cold, but we're an hour after it, just to give everyone a bit of insight as to when we're recording exactly, which we don't normally do. But how do you feel sort of an hour after the game?
Yeah, frustrated. Really frustrated. The first half and second half were two totally different performances. And it's really annoying that it took us to go 2-0 down at half-time to start playing the way we have been, away from home especially. So... It's one where I don't want to be too negative, but today was the first time you could see where, to me, I know we're missing a striker, and we'll get on to that, I'm sure, because it's hard not to speak about it. But too many players underperformed in the first 45 minutes, and the play was loose. It just looked like we just weren't at it. A lot of players just weren't at it, and unfortunately, in this level, you're not going to get away with that without getting punished. And we really did get punished first half. It was shocking, but I see I'm frustrated because we go back the second half. We did really well to get back into it. I think putting Clark through the middle gave us a bit more somebody to aim at in behind, and he took his goal really well. But it's just, where was that performance first half? Just frustrating is the main word, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd like to think that I'm neither a happy clapper nor am I a doommonger, and I just say what I think, and I'd like to think we're all pretty similar with that. So the real positive, I suppose, is if you'd given us this league position and this amount of points at the start of the season and one bad performance in 13 or one really poor performance or poor 45 because we were bare second half, then I'd probably snap your hands off. But there's only so many times you can say that before you go, and I've said it once or twice in the past couple of weeks. So I don't know. Maybe I'll feel a bit more positive and bright about it in the morning. But we decided to do a bit of a reaction a little bit closer to full time this week, which I'm all right with. But Brad, obviously, like you said before, a bit despondent, if not like wanting to kind of, put our head through a wall. But how are you feeling about it?
Yeah, pretty similar to Ross. It's just a bit more frustrating. I mean, touching on what you've just said there, where we're talking about someone give us these points at the start of the season, yeah, we're just snapping the hands off. But that's because we were going into the unknown. Considering how we were competing when we had strikers there, I'm not just saying Ross Stewart, even Ellis Sims as well. When we had strikers, you're looking now at the points that we've dropped. The points that we've dropped, and you're just thinking in hindsight, if we did have the strikers, where would we be? So it's more of a frustration now. Yes, we like we said, we'd take it from the start, but we're not at the start now. We're 11, 12 games in. And if you're looking at it, the games where we've failed to score or we've just threw it away, it's just little. I mean, we haven't lost by more than 1 goal this season. It's just fine margins where you look at the table, there's 7 points from 4th to 19th. We could be breaking away from the 4th position if we'd have just converted some of these chances. And so it's just a little bit frustrating, to be honest with you. I was a bit pissed off first half, and I'm going to use an explicit there. More on the lines of Swansea tend to score goals from set plays, and we aren't a big team. But our tactics was not to press them high, and let's just give them free kicks within 30 yards of the goal. And 2 of their goals have came from just, it's just some put in the box, and we can't defend it. So yeah, second half came out. I was very surprised not to see changes because I've just said on Total Sport there, you could have hooked any single one of them. I thought Gooch was appalling today, to be honest with you. And I don't like to slate the lad, but I thought he was bordering on being embarrassing.
I'm not going to disagree. He was bad today. I'm not going to disagree. Spade's a spade. I'll give him loads of credit when he came back, but that was, and he was poor on Wednesday against Blackpool as well.
I don't hold back. And when a player's needs to come in for some criticism, like I've done for my mate Corey last year, I'll give them it. So I hope Gooch can prove me wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised next week if we've seen a lot of changes, not just Evans, which is going to be a forced change because of his yellow card now, which is very disappointing as well. But I wouldn't be surprised to see the likes of maybe Gooch coming out the side, and you might move O'Neill into right back and bring in Dennis Serkin, for example. Something needs to change. We need to be more on the front foot like we were second half because things can happen. I mean, we won that second half 2-0, 1-0. I wish it was 2-0 because it rained too well. We won the second half 1-0 by playing well and getting in their faces. And for all Swansea all season have been known as a possession-based side, it finished 50-50. So there are positives that we can take from it. But I hope to God we've got a striker ready for next week. Ellis Sims, play Ross Stewart. Kick the ball to him, even if he's got his injury still. Just give us something to aim at.
Yeah, and we're going to get on to it with the striker situation because we kind of have to. But before we do, obviously, there's a few other talking points I suppose we need to get through. Ross, one big one for me was I was really surprised at the lineup. I don't think I expected us to be as bad as we were first half based on previous performances. But I thought the only change being Ahmad going out for Dan Neil and just reverting back to like Pritch up front was a bit surprising for me because for me it's not really worked with Ahmad up front or with Pritch up front. And I wanted to see something a little bit different. I don't know what I wanted to see different. Maybe Benetti through the middle because I think he's the most. I don't think he'll make a huge difference, but I think he looks like the player that can maybe play off the shoulder. Which is a striker-esque trait, I suppose. But were you surprised by the lineup, Ross? What you started with?
Yeah, I thought Pritchard and Embleton were very lucky to be playing. I don't know how many games it's been since Pritchard affected it in a positive manner, if I'm honest. I think he's got away with a lot of, you see Dan Neil and Gooch rightly so today, but he always gets some unnecessary stick for me, and then you see Roberts today and a few people around us on Tuesday were giving him pelters, but Pritchard just seems to get away with it, and his deliveries in the box have been poor, his passing's been sloppy, and that was one of the main problems we had today. When we did get the ball up front to Pritchard or Embleton, who were playing as that more advanced player, they then didn't hold the ball up. I know physically it wasn't that, but it was just bringing players into play. Simple 5-10 yard passes. They were either overhit or they were under hit, or they were like 5 yards to the left or 5 yards to the right of them, and it just put us on the back foot constantly. And I thought he, for all Ahmad didn't look like he was going to score as a striker, he still did a lot of good work in linking up the play on Tuesday night. And I think we actually lost our way a bit when he went off, if I'm being honest. And Blackpool seemed to get him more in possession. So I was surprised at that. I was surprised at how long it took them to make the substitutions, although justified in a way because we came out setting off and we were good. But I think for the first time they might have got an absolute Tony Mowbray rollicking because they came out a different team. But once again, to me, Embleton and Pritchard didn't really do much. I know the players who came on, Bennett when he came on did one good run, put a ball in the box and mixed it up. But it's got to come to a point where these new lads who are coming off the bench and making an impact must be thinking, well, what have I got to do to get in the team? I think it might happen with Barr now with Evans' suspension for the next week against Wigan. But it's going to be, he's got a bit of a conundrum here, Mowbray, because these players aren't going to keep coming off the bench and performing and keep it all happy and rosy-dozy while people like Pritchard and Embleton, at the moment, for me, is stinking the gaff out when they're on the pitch. You've got to find a compromise in keeping consistency, but also changing it up when it needs to be changed because the performance levels have dipped since Watford.
I thought it was quite funny. Someone mentioned before, just bring a bit more light and positivity in here. Someone mentioned the Tony Mowbray rollicking at half time was probably just digestive biscuits flying everywhere, like out of his mouth specifically. It's just crumbs in everyone's hair. Yeah, I agree though. I think obviously we're just chatting, me and there, Brad, obviously on the chat down the side, which obviously nobody can see, but I agree with what you just said there, Brad. So Brad basically said that Pritchard's like a prime example of a player with credit in the bank and it's running out. I agree with that, I think. And I don't really like Harman players. I love praising them. I love loving them. It's a nice feeling. And I really, really rate Alex Pritchard. But for me, he hasn't had an assist since the Bristol City game, which he was excellent. And I think Pritchard was one player most of us didn't really worry about him stepping up. I touched on it a little bit last week and I actually bottled it a bit and said, like, no, like I want to try and be as positive as I can because I'm enjoying this positive feeling. But I thought he was poor again on Wednesday. And I didn't think he was very good today. And I'm thinking, well, when do you impact the game? And when are you going to start putting those assists in? When are you going to become that player that everything goes through like you were a bit last year? Because the longer it goes on, the longer you go, well, is this why it hasn't worked out at championship level before? Because you're actually just a really good League One player. And I know it's a bit harsh and that's got to happen for me to think that. And I don't think that at the present time. But for me, some players you can say, well, there's nothing to hit. But Pritchard didn't really have him. When he had things to hit, he wasn't hitting it then either. If I'm honest, I can't really remember the last really good game Pritchard had after Bristol City, which he was very good. He was excellent. He got 2 assists that day. And I'm not in the business of calling anyone out. Do I believe Pritchard can bring it back? Absolutely. 100%. The kid's a massive talent. People didn't spend £12 million on him for nothing, and he's a vastly experienced player at 29. I just think he's been poor for weeks, and I think that's a problem. And I didn't want it to be one, but it has been. But I thought next question to you, because maybe this isn't the Alex Pritchard show, and I don't want to hammer one player too much because there was a lot of bad performances there, especially in the first 45. And there was some good ones, which we'll come on to. There was some decent ones. But while we always like to start with the positives, there is negatives from today, and we have to be honest with that. We have to face up to it and be honest. Swansea are in really good form. Like, let's not deny it. They are a good side as well. We are a side playing without strikers. So there's reasons for potentially that bad performance, but that first 45 wasn't good enough. And what I mean by that is it wasn't good enough by our own high standards, which have been set by those players. Not by my standards or what I think we should be doing. They've set that standard, and the first 45 did not reach that standard. What do you, Brad, put that first 45 minutes down to? Is it too simplistic to kind of blame the striker situation?
I think it's a little bit of confidence. They know that we've played well the last couple of games and have had nothing to finish it off, shall we say? And I think they're trying to change their game, and it's just not working. I mean, first 45, while we were poor, I think that's probably the best 45 minutes of football we've seen from another team this season. Thought Swansea were excellent. They lived up to the name of keeping the ball well, like really well. Every time I think we got the ball, they just turned it back over, and they look dangerous. So we can't take too much away from Swansea, if I'm honest with you. And I think that sort of the players knew that they were going to be chasing shadows for a lot of it, because Swansea are good at keeping the ball. And I think at times as well, when we had the ball, I think we were just panicking, not knowing where to go with it. We were getting in good areas down the left and right, but then Swansea would have 5, 6, 7 players back, and we just didn't know where we needed to go. But look, it did get addressed at half time. Let's not say it was a bad 90 minutes. It got addressed at half time. We came out, and Mowbray's done something right. He's changed it, albeit not in personnel. He's changed a bit of shape. He's swapped players around, and it did start to work, and we got a goal from it. Now it's just, we've given ourselves a mountain to climb. You can't afford to concede just before half time. Going at 1-0, they get the same rollicking, but we come out, and that's a different ball game when it goes to ones apiece. Because Swansea still had something to hold on to. So, I mean, going back to the Pritchard thing, I think he needs a spell out of the side, if I'm honest, a game or two, just to recharge. You've got to think as well, the start of last season and towards the back end as well, he was picking up injuries. And if I'm not correct, I don't think he's missed a game this season. I think he started nearly every one, or pretty much every game. There's no harm at the minute, if we are changing it up, it's just to bring him out of the side for a game or two and see if we can change how we want to play, a little bit more pace. And if we put someone in this position that's maybe a little bit taller, a little bit more physical, it might work. And then Pritchard could come back in, or just give him the last 20 minutes when legs are tiring. We might see a different player then. So I think Mowbray's got a big week ahead of him after that.
Yeah, me too. I think you touched on Pritchard then, and we'll go back to it a bit. We really miss Ross Stewart as fans, because he's just so important. He's just so important. But do you think that Pritch misses Stewart? I know that might be really like an obvious thing to say. Like, does he miss the striker that like basically takes up all of his quality? But do you think he's a bit like, because we weren't that bad against Blackpool first half, second half I thought we were really poor. We played well second half to date. And I think it's a huge positive that the lads have never let their heads drop despite everything that's gone against them, like Alex Neil going, both strikers getting injured, stuff like they can't deal with. They've been so positive, and we've still never been out of a game this season, which is a massive positive. That's one positive you can take from today. Swansea was always going to be a tough game, whether we turned up or not. And we were never really out of it because of how early we scored in the second half, and the second half performance was a lot better. But do you think that there's, not just maybe with Pritchard, maybe with a few players, Brad, in the team as a whole, collectively, we've kind of beat Reading 3-0. We've dealt with the Middlesbrough disappointment and the fact that we had to deal with Stewart getting injured just before. Then we've gone to Watford and got a really morale-boosting sort of draw against, a side that's probably going to be up and around there, I think, come the end of the season. And then we've kind of gone on this little run where we haven't really scored. We scored 1 in 3, haven't won in 4. Is the fact that the strikers aren't there and they are missing chances that maybe should score, and we haven't got things to hit. Is that maybe eroding confidence? Is that where the start of the eroding of the confidences came from? The fact that we don't look the same side without Stewart.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of times that I've noticed it in the home games recently as well. When the likes of your Pritchard, your Embleton, they might pick it up on the edge of the box in the corner, and they're having to come back out or like just rebuild the play. When we have got a strike, when you see they just put it in there, like they're just a little dink into the box, and Ross usually sometimes got on the end of it. If he didn't score, we'd get a corner out of it. But it seems like as soon as they get in that position, where 9 times out of 10 they can just dink one in, they haven't to think on the feet and like, right, I can't do that now. There's nobody there, and it just changes the game. And then they know if they get in that position later, they're going to have the same dilemma, and I think it is affecting them as players. Like, don't get me wrong, they've got all week to work on different things, but coming up and playing against a team that have set up to nullify anything that you're going to throw at them is a completely different matter than just having to kick about on Monday to Friday and trying to work on new things. So, yeah, they massively miss them. And we need Sims back just as a presence. Even if they're not getting on the end of it, what Sims and Stewart do is they occupy two centre-halves, and that gives you the option of another player to get in behind. So even if it misses them out, they've occupied their two biggest players, tends to be a centre-halves player in the middle. So, yeah, it's frustrating, Graham. I don't know what else to say. It's completely frustrating because we are building up the player well enough. And if we had that extra striker, who knows what would have happened. And I'm sure you'll touch on it. I know you're a big advocate of Speakman not getting it right all the time. And another one with Speakman, like I've said about Pritchard, he had a bit of credit in the bank because some of the signs he made was very good. And end of the day, he got us out of that league as well by the appointments he made. But now he needs to really take a bit of ownership on the fact that he's left us short without strikers.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's interesting that the Speakman stuff, Ross, because here comes the word again. There isn't any nuance with it. You either think he's done a class job or he hasn't. The one person I've seen with a bit of nuance is maybe Bowers. And I've seen an article from Graham Atkinson during the week on Wise Men Say. And I'm sure there's more. Like, don't hate me if I haven't mentioned it. There's thousands of us in the Sunderland fan base, millions. I'm sure there's a lot more nuance than that. But off the top of my head, I always say Twitter's not the best barometer, yet I always use it as a barometer. What am I doing? I think Speakman's done a fantastic job, or you don't. And that kind of seems to be where it's at. I like to think I'm a bit more in the middle. I've got to be honest, my pendulum has swung more not for Speakman. I won't go into the reasons for that. I don't need to. That's just how I thought. But recently I thought, well, let's go through the players. And I thought the article that was done by Wiseman Say during the week was very good on that, in the sense that I went in depth on the players that were had there and give genuine balance to the players that he's brought in, and ultimately said, yeah, there's been errors there, but he's done a great job. So if I'm going to be equal with praise, I've got to be equal with negativity as well. I've said, and I think a few of us said in this, Ross, and lots of people have said, we needed a striker. And we've gone with this narrative that we're not going to sign a striker. And we're going with this narrative that I think Speakman set out and originally said in that podcast that we weren't going to play two, but we were playing two. And then Stewart got injured. And there's been a few weeks to sort this, to bring in maybe a free transfer, promote someone up from the youth team. And don't get me wrong, like, I don't like the Ryan Noble syndrome, as we'll call it, just promoting a kid and that'll work. But at the minute, we do need something that's going to be a focal point. Even if that's bringing in one of the younger lads and giving them a shot. For me, he's got that wrong, Speakman, because at this point, I think we've been cost points. I think we got cost points last week against Preston. I think we win that game with a strike on the pitch. I think we have a better chance of it. I think we maybe score a goal in the first half against Blackpool. We maybe lose today, but you can see a lot of the problems, which mean what Brad has just said there, that have come from the confidence is maybe getting eroded a little bit. That our best players have nothing to hit. They're all there to create goals. All those players like Embleton, Roberts, Clark. I mean, Clark's maybe the exception to the rule because he scores them as well now. When he scored 4 this season, so he's only 1 behind Stewart. But Clark, Embleton, Roberts, Pritchard, they're all there to create. They're all creators. They're not necessarily goal scorers. And we said after the Reading game, how class was that? But we're not going to do that every week. And thus it's proved. And I don't think that was a genius thing for me to come out with. It was an obvious statement. So I guess the question I'm asking here, Ross, is don't hammer Speakman because he doesn't deserve it. But also maybe we do need to question that decision, because how much are we missing a striker, Ross?
Massively, but it's not just scoring goals too. Like, we're on about how Swansea played today. And Harry Darlan just had all the time in the world to walk out the box with the ball and just take it down the pitch. If Ross Stewart or Ellis Sims are on that pitch harassing them and putting them under pressure, that then stops Swansea totally dictating the first half. And then you also look at the physical presence that they bring. How many times do Ross Stewart or even Ellis Sims, when he played at the start of the season, have they been in defence from set pieces and corners and they've been at the front post and they've got the head to it? We're missing the physical presence and the work rate up front just as much as scoring the goals, because other players were scoring goals whilst they were on the pitch as well, which it would still happen. It's not just a case of missing out the goals. I think it's that Brad mentioned it there, the overall play, the 1-2s, how they link up well. We're missing the presence more off the ball for me as well than just scoring goals. And Speakman has done a lot of good, but he's also now got to take responsibility for messing up. That's 2 big mess ups now. He hasn't got a striker. And let's be honest, Alex Neil pulled him out the shit last season, in my opinion. But he's done a lot of good. The restructuring, we've got a new youth coach in there who's meant to be highly rated from Rangers this week, Graham Murty. So we're getting ourselves back on track off the field, as well as on it. But I see it all go to the last week just feels very. It's okay, but what could have been? We're all okay. This is how I think we'd feel if we'd started the season this way, and if we'd played the same type of, we're all right, but we're nothing special. We haven't really done much, but we've just got by. If we were doing that the first 10 games, fair enough. In this position, you'd be like, yeah, brilliant start. This is what we expected, just staying up, staying. But it's when we've had an opportunity. When you look at the results in the rest of the league, everyone's beaten everyone. And then them 2 home games, especially, and then today I'd say is an anomaly because it wasn't just the fact that we missed a striker while we lost today or dropped points. We dropped points today because we defended terribly and we were shocking in possession and out of possession for 45 minutes. I think that could happen with Stewart or Sims on the pitch, personally, with the players who, in my opinion, were poor and at fault in those positions in midfield. That might have happened anyways. But I know, and we're going around circles, and I'm even doing that myself. I think if we're all being honest, we all knew we needed a striker, but we thought we'd get lucky again, and this time we just haven't. I think we probably all thought, oh well, Ahmad will do a job up there, Bennett could do a job up there, and it just so far hasn't worked. But it's not all doom and gloom. We've lost today by 1 goal. If it wasn't for Maxwell saving the last minute the other night, Clark's header goes in, we're looking at a total different story, you know. And I know we are giving away a lot of chances too, so you've got to give Patterson some praise because I thought he pulled off some good saves again today, and he couldn't do now about the 2 goals. The less said about that one back pass that nearly made me made me harder about my arse. But it's just very frustrating. But we've got a week now. We're in all games, rest up, and we've got to find a way of mixing it up. Because when we did that second half, and I think Clark might start through the middle now, and it might even give a chance for Bennett to come in on the wing, where I think one of Pritchard and Hamilton will drop out. And then I think we're going to see either Bart or Matete play now, where Evans out. So either way, there's going to be changes on Saturday. And then we've just got to pray that Ellis Sims' right foot and toe starts healing up. We need Uri Geller. That's who we need. Uri Geller. Bring back Uri Geller. We need a striker.
I feel like, and just to kind of touch on that, because Speakman's done loads of good, and he's probably, with me, got enough credit in the bank, just. And maybe that's overly critical, but because of the signings he's made, but I agree. And I think we're starting to see how important Ross Stewart is to us, and I agree with what you said about him off the ball as well, because for me, a possession-based side, Ross Stewart's an absolute nightmare, because he's just on you constantly. He works so hard. And I think it's worth remembering that his contract's not been sorted yet. He sat on the treatment table, have a chat. we can see how important he is. Just get it sorted. I think we struggle without a striker anyway. I think the truth be told is, even if we had brought a striker in, you're still missing Ross Stewart. Because for me, he's one of the best strikers in this league by far. Like comfortably. I just miss him. God, I miss him. Next 5 games are quite big because of the fact we haven't won in 4, but there's winnable games there and there's tons of positivity in it. I thought Jack Clark was good to the middle, second half. I think the option is there, Ross. I agree with you. I think maybe sticking him up top and then potentially putting Jewison and Bennett. Sorry, someone's screaming outside and it's just wild. What? That is wild. I don't know if you can hear that, but that sounds wild. Let me get my train of thought back here, for God's sake. I think it's just a woman screaming outside. That's mad. Yeah, so...
Put 999 after the podcast. It's not that urgent, eh?
No, I mean, I'll have to get it edited first as well. She's just standing in the street screaming. I'm going to leave this in, actually. She's not in any danger, people. Don't worry. She's just standing in the street and screaming.
Welcome to Glasgow.
Welcome to Glasgow, everyone.
This is why they didn't win Eurovision.
Oh, yeah. I feel. Although, fact that I found out today, fact of the day. Sorry to totally go off on a tangent, everyone. I know people hate this, apparently. But now the song Rotterdam by the Beautiful South, every city that they mention it is now being a Eurovision host. So anyway, there you go. Fact of the day. Corey Evans is suspended next week, Brad. It's a big blow because Corey Evans is absolutely vital to how we play, in my opinion, and now yours as well. And that's a big game next week, Wigan, because Wigan at home, I would have earmarked at the right of the start of the season as a game we should be looking to win. And ultimately, we're 11th. Come the end of the season, if we're 15th, yeah, I'll take it, no bother. But we could do with a home win. We've won 1 home game all season. That's not really something I would have snapped your hand off for at the start of the season. So if Corey Evans is suspended, how's your midfield looking next week? Forget the striker situation. There's nothing we can do about it, really. So who's your midfielders?
For me, it's Bar comes in for Evans. I think that's just a straight swap. Obviously, with other changes, that does affect the rest of the midfield, really. But the straight swap is Bar for Evans and see what he can do from the start. Diallo's had his chance from the start now. I think it's now time that we do see Bar. And then Pritchard maybe drop out and we see Bennett, whatever he's called. And we see him. There will be a couple of changes. I think the defence might change. Like I said, I think I could see Gooch dropping out. We might even go back to a back 3.
With Bailey on the right?
Yeah, but potentially. Or Luke O'Nien, move him out and bring Dennis Serkin back in. And put Elise back. Because Elise is actually a left-sided centre-half, isn't he?
Yeah.
So we could see that happen. There will need to be changes. Don't get me wrong. I mean, next weekend I'm going to spend half the game booing because I think 90% of their team are ex-Sunderland.
Yeah. Yeah.
And 2 of them are strikers. Would you believe it?
Can you loan a loan player, just in case, because it looks like Broadhead's not really getting the game, so can we loan a loan player from another loan club or whatever? No.
Charlie scored again today, which is nice.
Yeah.
I mean, they got beat 3-1, but just a word out there, it's really nice to see Charlie White back playing. Yeah. And scoring goals. And he's scored, and I think he got an assist for Broadhead at Birmingham the other week, which pissed me off big time. But no, it's great to see Charlie White back scoring. Hopefully he doesn't next week. But yeah, they've got 2 of our former strikers. The rest of the team's made up of ex-Sunderland as well. So we'll see how that one goes. But on us, changes will need to be made. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm going to put a number out there to say 5 changes. Because based on the performances that I've seen and players that might need a rest, and it seems to be the same players that are coming off every week. Embleton, Pritchard, I think Roberts will start, but then you've got the likes of Gooch, who's had a dip. I wouldn't be surprised to see him maybe up to 5 changes next week, mate.
I think we need freshening up, definitely. And I think next week's massive. I just worry about the nothing to hit thing still. And I don't know how to remedy that. myself, so I don't envy Tony Mowbray with it. But just to sort of finish off, next 5 games: Wigan at home, Blackburn away, Burnley at home, Luton away, Huddersfield away. Ross, I'm going to give you the last word. We're 4 points off the playoffs. We're 6 points away from the bottom 3. This league is tight as a gnat's arse. How much do you think in those next 5 games, which is a lot of winnable games in there, we'll learn about this team and where the season's going to go in the next few weeks, whether it's going to be a struggle, whether it's going to be boring mid-table, or whether we can actually do something and make a bit of a push for the playoffs, which is still potentially there?
Well, it said Sims 2 to 3 weeks, didn't it, originally? So in the next week or two, we should be seeing Ella Sims back, which will help. But I think we'll see what we're about and how momentum's going to carry us, or downward momentum's going to affect us. I think that could be a big thing, because it's seen in this league, once you get on a run, 2 wins and you're in the playoffs. It's crazy, as you say. But we'll see what we're about, and let's hope we can score some goals. That would be lovely at home.
Yeah, I think next few weeks are really, really big. But ultimately, 11th in the table. We responded in the second half. We've never been out of a game this season. There's some red flags, which are not great. Ultimately, there's been more positive this season than negatives, much like Christian Speakman, in case anyone's wondering and thinks I've hammered him too much. But onwards and upwards, there's lots of winnable games there. Huddersfield have looked awful this season. We've looked good away from home. Wigan at home is a winnable game. Blackburn away, I'm sure Tony Mowbray knows a lot about that. So fingers crossed onwards and upwards, and stay positive throughout the week. We'll obviously be back with the preview show as well. But thanks as always. Like, listen, subscribe, do what you want. If you don't, it's fine. Cheers.
Goodbye.
There are, lads.